This happened nearly a decade ago, but even now, whenever I think back on it, I still get chills down my spine. Some things, no matter how much you want to forget them, cling to you like an ink stain on your memory. You can't wash them out. At the time, I was 24, a final year graduate student. One of the requirements for graduation was to participate in and present at an academic conference, something most of us treated as an obligation rather than anything exciting. This conference was organized by undergrads, small in scale, but fully dressed up in proper form. A stage, banners, invited guests, weak coffee and thermos dispensers, and a crowd of people trying hard to look professional. I went in with the mindset of getting it over with. I had my research, presented it neatly, smiled at the right moments, shook a few hands, and planned to slip out. I didn't expect that in such an ordinary-seeming place, I'd meet someone who would keep me up at night for years afterward. She was on the organizing committee, probably 2 or 3 years younger than me. I still remember her name, even though I've tried to forget it. At first contact, she was completely normal, friendly, enthusiastic, a bit lively, but not over the line. She helped me set up the presentation equipment, asked about all sorts of little details, and I just saw her as an energetic student. I'm a polite person, so I responded in kind. But gradually, I noticed small things that made me uncomfortable. She always spoke to me louder than necessary, often stood too close, and her eyes never left me even when others were around. Once, while laughing, she lightly touched my shoulder, just a fleeting touch, but it chilled me. I told myself I was exaggerating. Some extroverts like to signal friendliness through physical contact. I reassured myself with that to stay calm. What mattered was that I was in a serious relationship at the time. My girlfriend studied in another state, and we had plans to get engaged after I graduated. I didn't want trouble, didn't want misunderstandings, and certainly didn't want to give anyone an opening. So I kept my distance, polite but minimal, and didn't start any extra conversations. When the conference ended, I thought it would be the last time I saw her. I was wrong. A week later, an email arrived. Sender, that girl. The tone was light and courteous. She said she was writing a paper on the same topic as mine and asked for references. I didn't see anything unusual. I sent a few PDFs, a few articles, wished her luck, and considered it done. But it wasn't. A few days later, she wrote again. This time, she wanted to meet in person so I could look over her draft. I politely declined, saying she could just email it because I was busy. She didn't give up. She insisted we had to meet, saying there were parts that needed in-person explanation. Then she added that she needed a particular reference book, and she knew I had it. The phrase, "I know you have it," made me pause. I didn't remember ever mentioning it. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was simply serious about the topic, just a student in need of help. I decided to cut things off as soon as possible. I took the book to the campus library, arranged to meet, and planned to hand it over and leave immediately. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. I gave her the book, told her she could keep it, and turned to go. She beamed, eyes shining like a child receiving a gift. I only wanted to get out of there. I thought my cold look and decisive demeanor made it clear enough to end any illusions. But I underestimated the intensity of her fixation. A few days later, I received a text from an unknown number. It was her. I had never given her my phone number. I understood immediately. She'd taken it from the conference registration list, where participants' personal information was stored. She'd exploited her role on the organizing committee to dig through data that should have been protected. A small act, but it said everything. I texted back, trying to stay calm. "Sorry, this number is for personal matters only." The reply came immediately. "Then why don't you let it be personal this time?" I put the phone down, feeling as if someone had just tightened a grip around my throat. Everything had shifted from friendly to something else. A warped kind of interest. I didn't respond again, hoping silence would make her lose interest. But my silence only made her escalate. A few weeks later, a friend of mine, a classmate, pulled me aside and asked, "Are you dating that girl from the conference?" I laughed. "No, why would you ask that?" She looked at me, her expression serious. "Because she's telling people the two of you are in love." This happened nearly a decade ago. But even now, whenever I think back on it, I still get chills down my spine. Some things, no matter how much you want to forget them, cling to you like an ink stain on your memory. You can't wash them away. Back then I was 24, a final year grad student. One of the requirements for graduation was to participate in and present at an academic conference, something most of us treated as an obligation rather than anything exciting. The conference was student-run and small in scale, but it had all the trappings of seriousness. A stage, banners, guests, watery coffee and thermoses, and a crowd of people trying to look professional. I went with the mindset of just getting it done. I had my research, presented it neatly, smiled at the right times, shook a few hands, and planned to slip out quietly. I didn't expect that in such an ordinary-seeming place, I would meet someone who would keep me up at night for years afterward. She was on the organizing committee, probably 2 or 3 years younger than me. I still remember her name, even though I've tried to forget it. Our first interaction was completely normal. Friendly, enthusiastic, a bit high energy, but not over the line. She helped me set up the projector, asked about small details, and I took her for an energetic student. I'm polite by nature, so I responded in kind. But gradually, I noticed little things that made me uncomfortable. She always talked to me louder than necessary, often stood too close, and her eyes wouldn't leave me even when others were around. Once, while laughing, she lightly touched my shoulder, just a fleeting touch, but it made my skin crawl. I thought I was probably exaggerating. Some extroverts show friendliness through physical contact, I told myself, trying to stay at ease. What mattered was that I was in a serious relationship at the time. My girlfriend was studying in another state, and we had plans to get engaged after I graduated. I didn't want trouble, didn't want misunderstandings, and certainly didn't want to give anyone an opening, so I kept my distance, polite but minimal, and didn't start any extra conversations. When the conference ended, I thought that would be the last time I saw her. I was wrong. A week later, an email arrived. The sender was that girl. The tone was light and courteous. She said she was writing a paper on the same topic as mine and asked for references. I didn't see anything unusual. I sent a few PDFs and articles, wished her luck, and considered it done. But it wasn't. A few days later, she wrote again. This time she wanted to meet in person so I could look over her draft. I politely declined, saying she should just email it because I was busy. She didn't give up. She insisted on meeting, saying there were parts that needed to be explained in person. Then she added that she needed a certain reference book, and she knew I had it. The line, "I know you have it," made me pause. I didn't remember ever mentioning it. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was simply serious about the topic, just a student needing help. I decided to cut things off as soon as possible. I brought the book to the campus library, arranged to meet, and planned to hand it over and leave immediately. The meeting lasted not even 5 minutes. I gave her the book, told her she could keep it, and turned to go. She beamed, her eyes shining like a child getting a present. I just wanted to get out of there. I thought my cold gaze and decisive manner made it clear enough to end any illusions. But I underestimated the level of her fixation. A few days later, I received a text. From an unknown number. It was her. I had never given her my phone number. I understood immediately. She'd gotten it from the conference registration list, where attendees' personal information was kept. Taking advantage of her role on the organizing committee, she had rifled through data that should have been protected. A small act, but it said everything. I texted back, trying to stay calm. "Sorry, this number is for personal matters only." The reply came immediately. "Then why don't you make it personal this time?" I set the phone down, feeling as if someone were squeezing my throat. Everything had shifted from friendly to something else, a warped kind of attention. I didn't reply again, hoping silence would make her lose interest. But my silence only made her escalate. A few weeks later, a friend of mine, a classmate, pulled me aside and asked, "Are you dating that girl from the conference?" I laughed. "No. Why would you ask that?" She looked at me, her face serious. "Because she's telling people the two of you are in love." It felt like all the blood rushed to my head. I hurried to deny it, saying I barely knew her. My friend nodded, then pulled out her phone. "You need to see this." On the screen was her Twitter account. Her display name included my name, as if we were a couple. Her bio read, "Belongs to my name." The first tweet that hit my eyes, "He looks so tired today. I wish I could hold him while he sleeps." Another, "Such a cute date at the library." I was stunned. The date at the library, she mentioned, was the time I handed her a book and walked away. In her mind, it had become a romantic date. The tweets were dense, dozens of them, public, some sweet, some suggestive. She didn't even follow me, yet she kept tweeting about me, as if living in a world where we truly were together. If I posted a status like, "Long day at work," she would immediately write, "I wish I could take care of him after work. He deserves to be happy." I started to feel utterly violated. It was no longer harassment. It was an alternate reality where she constructed a version of me, living and loving the way she wanted, in front of everyone. A story I had never agreed to be part of. I asked my friend to spread the correction, to tell acquaintances that this girl wasn't normal. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. A week later, that friend messaged me again. "You need to keep reading." The tone on Twitter had changed completely. From sweet affection, it had turned to bitter hatred. He cheated on me. He pretends to be busy to avoid me. And then the last line that made my blood run cold. "I've heard he has a girlfriend. I won't believe it until I see her. But if I do, I'll make sure she regrets stealing him from me." In that moment, I knew this wasn't just an online issue anymore. She knew I had a girlfriend, and might even know her name, photo, or address. Fear crashed over me like a cold wave. I immediately blocked all her accounts and told my close friends so they'd be on guard. I told everything to my girlfriend. At first, she was confused, but when she saw the screenshots, she was silent for a long time and only said, "She's obsessed." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more afraid, because obsession can make people do anything. After graduation, I moved away, living with my girlfriend, now my wife, hours from the old city. I wanted to forget, but the memory kept clinging. Sometimes, late at night, while I'm scrolling, I catch a glimpse of an anonymous account liking my post, with a display name eerily familiar. And then it disappears. Years later, that same old friend told me the girl did the exact same thing to another guy in the group. The pattern didn't change. Approach, fabricate a romance, post a barrage of obsessive content, and when ignored, switch to hatred. This time, the guy had to change numbers, lock down his social media, and to this day, still lives in fear. The scariest part, I realized, wasn't her behavior. It was how easily she made other people believe it. With just a few tweets, a few blurry photos, a few testimonies from unverified voices. In this world, truth and lies are only a tap apart. If my girlfriend had seen those posts before hearing my explanation, or if colleagues had believed the first rumor, my life might have fallen apart that year. I think about that a lot. Social media gives us connection, but it also gives the obsessed far too much power. Now, every time I look at my phone screen, I remember her eyes at the library that day. Sparkling, too close, too real, and too dangerous. Because sometimes, the people who frighten us most aren't the shadows in the night, but the ones still out there somewhere, smiling, typing, and writing about you as if you still belong to them. I live in a managed apartment complex with two separate buildings. A main one with the lobby, mailroom, and amenities, and a second one, the one I live in now. Anyone who's ever lived in this kind of complex knows one simple but important thing. The less you have to cut through the main building at night, the better. That Sunday night, I had a DoorDash order. I always note clearly in the app that the driver can deliver straight to the side gate of my building so I don't have to pass through the main one. But almost no one ever reads that note. It's fine, I'm used to it. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A DoorDash notification. The order had been dropped off at the main building lobby. I sighed, threw on a jacket, and headed over. Under the delivery notes in the app, there was one short line. There's a suspicious man in the lobby. I'm afraid he might take your food. I paused for half a second. Was the driver still waiting? Or just tossing out a vague warning? I told myself the delivery driver was probably still nearby. So I quickened my pace toward the lobby. There are two ways to get back to my building. Take the elevator in the main building up to the 4th floor and cross to the secondary building via the connecting corridor. Or go through the underground parking garage that links the two buildings, a short straight shot, not pretty but fast. He had a fob in his hand, standing at the elevator call button. One glance told me I definitely didn't want to be trapped in an elevator with him. Just a few floors and he'd know where I lived, maybe even my unit number. I decided to go through the garage. He pressed the elevator. The steel doors opened. I didn't wait. I veered toward the side door, went through two security doors, and slipped into the garage where the ventilation fans hummed and the damp concrete smell rose up. Right then, every sense in me went taut like a drawn string. I got halfway and looked back. At first, it was just a habit of checking behind me. But there in the doorway, half of him sunk in that sallow yellow light, he stood motionless, watching me. He hadn't taken the elevator. He'd chosen to follow me through the garage. The coincidence sloughed off like an empty shell. I clenched the bag straps and sped up into a run. The sound of my heels bounced off the walls and ceiling, stretching out like a taut alarm wire. I shoved through the garage elevator lobby door, slapped the call button, jabbing it frantically until my fingertips stung. The indicator didn't move. The elevator car was still down below, longer than usual. Those waiting seconds turned into a blaze. I glanced around, running calculations in my head. If he lunged in when the elevator arrived, would I be strong enough to hold the doors? If I tried to hold them, both of us would be trapped in this area. Almost no cameras, no witnesses, no cell signal. The thought pounded against my ribs. My time was running out. I spotted the stairwell door nearby, still hugging the food bag, cut the corner, and took the stairs 2 at a time up 2 floors. My breath burned hot in my throat, my head beating time like a war drum. 4th floor. This is the level that has the corridor over to the 2nd building, my building. I could cross over and slip straight home. But if he'd managed to tail me this far, he'd know exactly which building I lived in. I hesitated for a beat, then decided to flip the script. I turned back toward the main building. If he was still following, I'd know for sure. Through the greenhouse glass, I caught a vague movement, the reflection on a door. Someone far off. Looked like they were taking out the trash. It was 11 p.m., and that was the first person I'd seen. I needed to be near someone, anyone. I cut across the courtyard, passed through the greenhouse area, rushed into the 4th floor hallway of the main building, and slid to a stop by the wall to catch my breath. The door behind me burst open. He charged in, panting like he'd sprinted the whole stretch of the garage. He barked right in my face, his voice so loud it clipped and distorted in the corridor. He accused me of stealing the DoorDash order, yelling that I could be evicted, jailed. I tried to keep my eyes neutral, but a single glance into his eyes and I saw the madness there. Blown pupils, a clenched jaw, a smile like a thin rip. The person taking out the trash had vanished somewhere. He stepped closer, small but forceful steps, shrinking the distance between us to a dangerous number. I raised my voice, hoping that if anything happened, someone in the nearby units would hear. He pointed at the bag and hissed that the 119 printed on the receipt was the real apartment number, that I had stolen it. I looked down. 119 was the order code, not a unit number. His reasoning was a tangle, but what he implied was crystal clear. Even if I had picked up the wrong food, which I hadn't, he would follow me all the way home to confirm, to see my unit number, to link me to the digits on the bag. I realized he'd scrutinized it closely enough to read the faint print on the receipt. To do that, he had to stand very close. And clearly, this had nothing to do with the food. If it were just curiosity or helping, he wouldn't have pretended to call the elevator, then peeled off through the garage to chase me across both buildings when he had no idea which unit the bag was going to. The truth slammed into my skull. He picked me because I was walking alone. Here, at this hour, it was just him and me. I heard footsteps in the corridor, distant, one fragile signal of other people. He hit the elevator button, his mouth spilling threats, pouring out meaningless accusations. I didn't wait for him to get in. I turned and sprinted full tilt back through the greenhouse, across the courtyard, to my building, tapped my fob, hit the elevator, and practically collapsed inside as the doors slid shut. Back in my apartment, my body finally gave out for real. My whole self shook, pins and needles from neck down to my palms, my breath chopping into ragged, wheezy cuts, even though I've never had asthma. I had to cling to the wall, the table edge, anything, to keep from crumpling from lack of air. One image stuck to my mind, glued on like a wet stamp. The moment I looked back in the garage and saw him standing in the doorway, half of him sunk in shadow, half jutting into the dingy sodium light, motionless like an exclamation point that watches. I couldn't sleep. My head spun like a pulley wheel. I wrote a long email to management. Minute-by-minute details, every turn I took, attaching the DoorDash screenshots with timestamps and location. I wanted them to check the security cameras, wanted proof that couldn't be denied. 4 days went by. Every morning I jolted awake to a racing heart, heat flushing off me like a fever, jumping at the smallest sound. This was a new kind of anxiety, clingy, unyielding, like a claw pressing at the back of my neck. All day I timed my comings and goings, planned out mail and deliveries to keep the chance of running into him as low as possible. It's terrible when you realize you feel unsafe in your own home. Early the next morning, there was a knock. Building management and a maintenance staffer were outside. I cracked the door just enough to see their arms and badges. I was still shaken and must have looked awful. Puffy eyes, trembling hands. They apologized for what had happened, said they'd reviewed the cameras, and the footage was terrifying. They told me I needed to call the police immediately. The manager was very kind. He said he would sit and call with me so I wouldn't have to do it alone. I asked if they knew who that resident was. They looked at each other, then nodded. Very well, in fact. And this wasn't the first time he'd been reported for harassment. My heart sank to the bottom again. I changed quickly, met the manager in the lobby, and avoided the areas where they knew he tended to loiter. We called the police together. I recounted everything, trying to keep my voice even. The manager added his testimony. Turns out I was the fourth woman in the building he had harassed. And although he'd caused trouble before, he had never pursued anyone at night like this. The manager said he'd been in the business for many years, had seen all kinds of things, but had never encountered a resident behaving like that. He picked women who were walking alone, focused only on them, absolutely never approached men, and wouldn't go near women if they were accompanied by a man. People on his floor had complained repeatedly that he frightened them and made life unbearable. He'd been arrested for harassing women and had been sent to a psychiatric facility. Most recently, he'd been jailed and released 2 weeks ago, and management had no idea he'd returned until I filed the complaint. The dispatcher said the matter was very serious and would send officers to take an official report. During the call, I learned his full name, date of birth, apartment number. And when he'd moved in, he'd been here less than 6 months. If the lease was 12 months, that meant he'd be around for quite a while. The police asked if I'd seen him holding anything, like a weapon. I said I wasn't sure. While I was running, I only saw his eyes and his arm and couldn't focus on any object. I said, "There are cameras. Can't you check whether he had anything?" The officer answered with a line that stunned me. "Even if you don't remember, and even if later it's found he had a weapon, you can't change your statement to say he did." I pressed, "But there's evidence. He followed me, threatened me, crossed 2 buildings." The officer shot back as smoothly as reading from a script. "Did he say, 'I'm going to kill you' or 'I'm going to shoot you'?" I said no, but he still threatened me. The officer only shrugged. Unfortunately, that counts as harassment, and harassment isn't a crime, nor is it enough to make an arrest. Above all, management said they had tried to evict this man, but didn't have enough evidence, and the eviction process is long and difficult. They really couldn't do anything. The officer gave me a business card with a case number, instructing me to call him directly if the man approached me again or if I felt unsafe. I went back to my apartment, head thick with fog, trying to think what the next step should be. I decided not to leave home for the next few days. I ordered self-defense items and an additional doorbell camera. Because he'd stood close enough to the food bag to read the order number, I was afraid he'd put the pieces together, look up my name on the directory in the lobby, and track down my unit. I couldn't risk another encounter, so I stayed put until the devices arrived. Using the information I had, I searched public records. 6 cases since 2018. The most recent entry was August 2024. The entries involved stalking, harassment, restraining orders, extended anti-harassment protection orders, domestic violence, and firearm surrender orders. Orders he refused, meaning he could still legally possess guns. Multiple women had tried to serve him protection orders, but failed. He ducked service, didn't show up in court, was hard to contact. I could hardly believe it. This person was still freely moving through the common areas, and management had never notified residents, not even basic safety guidance for dealing with him. By this point, I understood this wasn't a troublesome neighbor, but a real danger. He had unresolved mental health issues, might still possess multiple firearms, and worse, he was angry with me. With a stalking history like that, if he saw me again soon, he would remember the encounter, might latch on like mud caked on a tire, and then escalate. A few days passed, and I didn't leave the building. Finally, a notice from the post office arrived. The camera had been delivered. The problem was the mailroom was in his building, on the same floor he lived on. I asked management to pull the footage from that night. They stalled for 2 days, replying in circles. Eventually, they sent a few compiled clips from different areas. In one video, you can see him following me into the garage, shortly after I entered, right after the little act at the elevator. In the clip that chilled me most, you see me enter the garage elevator lobby, press the button, pace frantically, then brace the door while I waited, before realizing the elevator wouldn't arrive in time and bolting into the stairwell. A few seconds later, he appears, looks at the lit call panel, then turns toward the stairwell door, concluding I'd taken that route, and gives chase. Intent plainly visible. Strangely, the part where he caught up to me, pointed at the receipt on the bag, and screamed was missing. But there was a later clip of me sprinting across the courtyard back to my building. I saved everything into a folder with a cold name, if needed. Even so, life didn't get easier. Around 6 p.m. a few days later, I had to get my mail. I've got a married friend who lives in his building, 3 floors away. She didn't know any of this. I texted to ask if she could meet me on the 4th floor, exactly where the encounter had happened, and also where I had to pass through to reach the main lobby. I took a deep breath, kept my phone on a live call, my friend's voice in my ear like a lifeline. I went to the end of the hallway, opened the door to the courtyard. With every ounce of vigilance I had, I glanced toward the greenhouse. A face appeared in the reflective glass. My head rang. Impossible. But it was him. He stared, lips moving around some words, then curling into a grotesque smile. Then he screamed. The scream punched straight through the glass, making the air in front of me seem to vibrate. I froze, my hands shaking so hard it was difficult to keep hold of my phone. I turned, almost sobbing, and ran back to my building. My friend was behind him in the hallway. She saw everything as he yelled at me. She hadn't come with her husband like I'd asked, and now it was too late. His eyes had locked onto me, angry like a searchlight, blazing straight onto an animal in the night. A few people in the corridor panicked and asked if I was okay, but my jaw felt clamped shut. The words stuck in my throat. My friend was still on the line, urging me to go straight to my apartment. She and her husband would come immediately. They arrived a few minutes later and stayed with me while I hurriedly threw things into an emergency bag. We decided it wasn't safe for me to be alone. Called another friend who lives farther across the city to ask if I could stay. My friend and her husband escorted me down the hallway. As we neared the elevator, I felt myself collapse inside. But I still made it to the car. On the first day at my friend's place, I wrote another email to management, repeating everything and adding the new times and locations. On the second day, silence. My friend and her husband went in person to the management office to report it because she had witnessed him yelling. They came back with an answer that felt like tumbling down an invisible staircase. Management was aware of me and the complaint, but couldn't do much because he was protected under the Fair Housing Act. I understand that means they can't refuse to rent because of a disability, including mental illness. The context is that most buildings in the city have MFTE units, affordable housing under assistance programs. People can qualify based on income, sometimes with protections due to disability. Perhaps that's why he could stay. And apparently management was afraid that if they tried to evict him, he could counter-sue for discrimination. I don't have a boyfriend living with me. That seems to be the only barrier that kept him targeting me. My sister and her husband are planning to fly out to help me pack up and leave. That breaks my heart. This complex is beautiful. The amenities are great. The interior is new. It has everything I wanted. But all of that suddenly became meaningless when my safety was drained away in a single night. I don't have a clear plan, only that I can't go back to the apartment unless there's a guard with me anytime I'm in the building. What that means in the short term, I don't even know. I just know I can't keep living here and pretend the peace was never shattered. Night. In my friend's living room, I lie on a strange sofa, listening to the soft whir of the AC and the distant traffic outside. I stare up at the ceiling and watch the streaks of streetlight sweep across like strokes from a dull blade. I close my eyes and see again the yellowed doorway of the garage. See him standing there, half in shadow, not hurrying, not smiling, just waiting. I snap my eyes open, as if I've just been shoved off the water's edge. My hand automatically feels for my phone and taps the new doorbell camera. In my head, a string of questions runs without stopping. Why would a man choose to pursue a stranger woman in the middle of the night? Why pretend to take the elevator and then change course? Why know to look at the order number to invent a reason? Why are the camera systems missing exactly the segments that matter most? And why, with everything so obvious, do people still say not enough to arrest? I don't have an answer. All I have left is the cold that recedes from my palms up to my nape. The feeling of someone who knows the line between safe and unsafe is as thin as the membrane of an elevator pane, as a heavy door that's a second late. And when you have to plot out your routes to avoid crossing paths with one face, when your eyes fixate on the characters 119 on an old receipt as if glued by a talisman, when every footstep in the hallway turns into an alarm order burrowing into your ear, you begin to understand. Fear doesn't need swords or guns. It only needs a pair of eyes that know how to stand in the right place at the right time, and a hand patient enough to follow you through 2 buildings on a night that's dark enough. I'm posting this from a throwaway because my girlfriend knows my main. Earlier this year, my girlfriend and her sister inherited a cabin after their mother passed away. Calling it a cabin is modest. It's a postcard pretty wooden house. Front facade facing a private lake. Old pines edging the shoreline, a little dock jutting into dark green water. My mother-in-law, I'm calling her that for convenience, used to live there alone 9 months a year. It's so quiet you can hear the wind change direction over the lake. Since June, my brother-in-law, M36, and I, M31, have driven up there most weekends, a few hours each time, to fix it up. Nothing major, some small repairs, new windows, putting up a second bedroom, and most recently refurbishing the dock. We do the manual labor, sweat, then sit catching our breath on the porch steps, watching the water change color with the time of day. If the story ended there, it would have been great. People drop by now and then, mostly my mother-in-law's old friends, coming to offer condolences or to see the place where she used to live. Locals also tend to wander by, curious about what we're remodeling. We put up a big sign right at the head of the lot. Private residence, no trespassing. Most folks respect it. The worst is every so often a Ford F-150 creeps into the parking area, then throws it in reverse and backs out like they'd taken a wrong turn. We know it's an F-150 because my sister-in-law, cautious by nature, made us install a surveillance camera system around the house since neither of us is there during the week. That detail becomes crucial later. Last month, I went up to the cabin alone. The in-laws were tied up with a wedding, and the projects I had planned for that weekend didn't require 2 people. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and froze immediately because of the smell. A wave of old cigarette smoke, thick, heavy, like something that had seeped into the wood. No one in our family smokes, same on my wife's side. I grew up in a no-smoke environment. Give me the faintest whiff and I'll catch it. But this wasn't faint. This was old smoke, acrid, like from a coat that's hung for ages in a closed room. I walked around, opened windows, turned on fans, held my breath trying to locate the source, but couldn't pin it down. The smell clung to my tongue and made me nauseous the entire weekend. Besides the smoke, nothing was obviously wrong. There were a few dirty dishes in the sink. I reassured myself. Probably my brother-in-law left them. He has a habit of forgetting to clean up after he eats. It's happened before. I washed the dishes, wiped the kitchen, tidied up. But the feeling that someone has been here sat in my head like a hulking shadow, refusing to leave. No evidence. Just a vague intuition that made the back of my neck prickle. In the weeks that followed, I started gluing my eyes to the camera system. Hours, nights, replay after replay, zooming in frame by frame. Nothing. Empty. Sometimes the motion sensor lights would snap on at night, the kind installed along the eaves and gate. But no frame ever caught anything human. In this area, deer or porcupine setting off the lights is normal. There was no way to be sure. So everything just hovered there. A masterless smoke smell, a few dirty dishes, motion lights flickering meaninglessly, and a feeling I couldn't name. Until today. We just got back from the cabin, and I think I finally have something approaching evidence. This weekend we had a big project, replacing the roof. It's heavy, hot, and loud work. So we set out about an hour earlier than usual to knock out the hardest part before the sun started blazing. Maybe that tiny schedule shift bumped into the routine of whoever has been hiding around here. We pulled in and stopped on the little drive beside the porch. I jumped out first. The moment I slid the key in and pushed the wooden door open, I heard it. The slam of another door on the opposite side of the cabin. Not the wind, not wood expanding, a crisp thud made by something with hands. My pupils tightened. Someone was in this house, and the sound of our truck made them bolt out the back door. Two versions of me went off in my head. One screamed, "Chase!" The other held me back. "Don't be stupid." I'm not the type to charge after a stranger into the woods, especially not knowing if they're armed or just how desperate they are. I looped back to the front porch, glanced along the tree line out back. Just enough to catch a smear of dark movement slipping tight to the forest's edge. A few seconds later, there was nothing. Only silent pines and the whisper of leaves rubbing together. Up close, the rear sliding door was unlocked. I stood there longer than I realized, staring at the naked latch like it was a cocky answer. We have a checklist before leaving. Check every door, every entry. My brother-in-law and I both know it by heart. Before we head out, we always make a round, ticking off each item in our heads. Neither of us forgets that step. Neither of us. Even so, the roof had to be replaced and life had to go on. We worked like normal. Set the ladders, strip shingles, peel off the felt, nail sheathing, lay new roofing. But the skin between my shoulders kept crawling, like an eye was pressing into my nape from somewhere in the trees. There were moments I stopped, not from fatigue, but because I was sure I just heard footsteps on dry leaves near the edge of the woods. I looked up and saw nothing but heat shimmer over the roof and a lake flat as glass. Every time I bent to grab the hammer, I imagined a figure standing right at the edge of the porch, just outside the camera's field of view, watching me work and counting the hammer blows like counting a heartbeat. He didn't just know we came up on weekends. He knew the exact schedule, knew our comings and goings, knew when the engine on the dirt road would send its echo up against the wooden porch, knew which spots to avoid so the cameras wouldn't catch him. He had our routine down well enough to play hide and seek for weeks. And he had one quality I hate to admit: patience. That's where things stand now. I'm planning to install another camera on the opposite side of the cabin to cover the other half of the yard and porch, the angle that person could exploit to blend into the tree shadows. One more eye, looking back at what the other eye misses. I've already sketched the layout in my head. Mounting height, tilt angle, cable runs, power, and the motion trigger threshold. The problem, ironically, isn't wires, screws, or money. The problem is people. I don't want to tell my girlfriend that her mother's cabin is being trespassed by a stranger. If she knew, I'm afraid she'd never dare come back. And it's the one thing of her mother's left. A place where every object has its story. Every scratch in the wood holds the imprint of the hands of the person who's gone. I want to protect that place for her. But for our family's safety, I know I can't let it get to the point of a face-to-face. That said, in my head I've already started drawing up another plan, a much more serious defensive plan, less reliant on luck, with more layers between us and anyone who thinks this cabin is theirs. Night fell. We locked the doors tight, set the bars, and made a round of the porch. The smoke smell had faded, or maybe my nose had gone numb from worry. On my phone screen, the camera recordings ran smooth as the lake. Columns of still images marching past, empty, straight as the teeth of a comb. I scanned every frame, imagining a pair of shoes pressed right up to the edge of the shot, just a few inches out. Outside, the dirt road out to the highway had swallowed the last of the lights. There was no one. But once you've opened a door and heard another one slam, that feeling will never again be no one in the ordinary sense. At dawn the next morning, with dew still thick on the porch steps, I went through the old checklist again. Front door, back door, sliding door, kitchen window, bedroom window, porch latch, attic vent. I muttered it like a prayer. My brother-in-law laughed to reassure me, saying it was probably just some passerby being nosy. I didn't argue. I only thought about the F-150 that had crept into the parking area and then backed out. Thought about the nameless smoke smell. Thought about the dirty dishes like fingerprints. Thought about someone versed enough to stand just outside the frame, listen to our schedule, and wait for a tiny lapse. And I thought about that 1-hour schedule shift, as small as a grain of sand, that had popped the quiet lid he'd kept over us for weeks. On the drive back, gravel pinged the undercarriage in a looping rhythm. I looked in the mirror, the curving road disappearing behind us like a thread being pulled into the woods. I didn't say anything to my girlfriend, at least not yet. I know I'll add another camera. I know I'll replace whatever locks can be replaced. I know I'll check more carefully, seal things up tighter, log every minute. I know I won't let a second door slam echo through this house when I'm the only one there. And I know, for the first time since her mother died, that the cabin is no longer just a place to keep memories. It has become something that needs to be protected. My story could end here. A blot of ink spreading across old wood. A smoke smell with no owner. Motion lights flicking on and off. Cameras recording nothing. And that thud of the back door on a morning we left an hour earlier than usual. But every time I think about it, the back of my neck goes cold, like there's wind blowing backward off the lake. Some things only have to appear once to change the way you open a door, the way you step into a dark room, the way you hear the fridge hum, the way you cross the porch at dusk. The person might have left that very moment, might never have returned. But every corner of the cabin now holds the echo of fleeing footsteps, reverberating in my bones like a reminder. Someone stood here, breathed this air, looked at what I love as if it were theirs. And I, whether I want to or not, heard him just once slam the door.